Let's continue discussing solving rational equations. Here's our next problem we're looking at. Here, you have something that looks a little different than what you're used to looking at. But it's actually just, it's not that bad to factor. All you got to do is think, what is the GCF from this guy right here? And you're going to realize that both terms have x, so you can take out an x. And what's left is x plus 5. And then you're going to look at your other fractions, and you're going to see that this is missing the x. So you're going to multiply it by x. And this is missing the x plus 5. So you're going to multiply it by x plus 5. From here, you see that all your denominators are the same. So you can cross out your denominator. Then you'll rewrite your numerators. Be very careful to remember that you need to put parentheses around this guy right here because he is a group. They are together on top of a fraction. They should not be separated yet. Because when you put parentheses here, it tells you need to distribute that negative sign. So it's very important to remember these parentheses. Equals x minus 4 times x plus 5. Okay, from here you just have a plain old equation. You're going to think, what can I do to this? And you may come to the conclusion there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can distribute. So we're going to do all of that in one step. Okay, next I'm going to combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign. And then I see that this is a quadratic, so it must equal 0. So I need to get rid of one of these sides. I'm going to get rid of this one. And once again, my x squareds cross out. And now I no longer have a quadratic. Once again, my quadratic has turned into a linear equation, which to solve, you need to get x by itself. So actually, instead of getting rid of this, I am going to move the x, because when I move the x, it turns it from a negative into a positive x, and it actually saves me a step. But if you started with the 25, it'll also work. It's just going to take you one extra step to get there. So you're going to get that x equals negative 25. Remember to double check that that's allowed. So we're going to come back up, look at our denominators, and you're going to see x plus 5, which means x is not allowed to be negative 5. And you're also going to see this x hanging out by himself. Okay? When you see that, that means that x is not allowed to be 0 as well. Because this x is kind of standing alone, which means if he was 0, he would be multiplying by all that. 0 times anything is still 0, which is not allowed. So x cannot be 5, x cannot be 0. Luckily, neither one of our answers is 5 or 0. So our answer is negative 25. Next problem. Just like before, I'm going to start by factoring everything I can. I'm going to think what multiplies to 4 that adds to negative 5. and you're going to get 4 and 1. As long as both of them are negative. Oops. Okay, then you're going to look at your other fractions and you think, what is it missing? What is he missing? He is missing x minus 4. He already has x minus 1. So I'm going to multiply by x minus 4 over x minus 4. And you're going to get the exact same denominator along the entire equation. So you can cross it out. Then I will rewrite my numerator. And I have a plain old equation. So you're going to think, what can I do to this equation? And if you're thinking distribute, you would be right. Okay, big long equation. I'm going to shrink it by combining my like terms. And then, last but not least, I'm going to see that this is a quadratic equation. So it must equal 0. Now, at this point, if you have mastered that worksheet that is on the front of your review packet, you will recognize that this is actually a quadratic with a GCF that you can factor out. So I'm going to factor out this 2, which means I'm going to divide everything else by 2 as well. So the negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 24 divided by 2 is negative 12. And then I can factor what's inside my parentheses again. Here I'm just thinking what multiplies to 12 that adds to negative 1. That would be negative 4 and 3. And once again, everything inside the parentheses is opposite. So you're going to get x equals 4 and x equals negative 3. And remember, before we lock in our answer, we need to come on up here to the top and check to make sure they are allowed. So here, flip the signs. You're going to get x cannot be 4, positive 4, and x cannot be positive 1. And we'll scroll back down and whoop, we'll see one of them is not allowed. This x is not allowed to be 4. That is an extraneous solution. So the only answer allowed is negative 3. Okay, last but not least, we'll work through this problem. Again, start by factoring out your denominator. What does every single term here have that I can divide by? They all have an x, so I can take out an x. And what's left when I do that is x squared plus 8x plus 12. Same thing here. X times x squared plus 8x plus 12. I can actually factor this guy again though. I can think what multiplies to 12 that adds to 8. And if you got 6 and 2, that would be correct. So then you have x plus 6 and x plus 2 as your factors. Now, You have to be really careful when looking at this problem because this fraction is actually missing two things that are in the denominator. It has the x plus 6, but it's missing the x plus 2 and the x. So I need to multiply it not only by x plus 2, but also by the x. Anything it's missing needs to get multiplied. Okay, once I've done that, all my denominators now match, so I can cross them out. And rewrite the numerator. Okay, before we go any further, I'm just going to write off to the side what x is not allowed to be. X is not allowed to be -6, x is not allowed to be 0, and x is not allowed to be -2. Okay, now we're going to look at this equation, and we're going to think, what can we do? And if you thought, maybe I could distribute this, you would be right. -2x squared minus 4x. Now you're going to look and think, what type of equation is this? And you would get, sure enough, it's a quadratic, so it must equal 0. So I need to get rid of this x and this 3. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Be very careful that you're lining up your like terms. 3 is a number, so it's going to go up under the other number. X is an x, so it's going to go under the other plain old x. These cancel. And I'm going to rewrite this in the standard form with the x squared term first. And I'm going to get this as my quadratic. Now, this is the type of quadratic, if you're going to solve this by factoring, where you'd have to multiply the first number times the last number. If you're not comfortable with that method, what you can also do is graph. So you can take this and plug it into a graph. You would get a graph, and whatever the x-intercepts are is what your answer would be. Now, for the sake of thoroughness, I'm going to show the factoring method, but just remember, you can always solve a quadratic by graphing. So, -2 times -2 gives +4. We're thinking, what can I multiply to get +4 that adds to -5? That would be -4 and -1. So I'm going to expand my b term with -4x, minus 1x, and bring down the -2 x squared in the front and the -2 in the back. Then I'm going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first two terms and the last two terms. You're going to think, what can you take out from this group that both terms have? Well, they both have a negative, they both can be divided by 2, and they both have at least 1x. What's left when I divide -2x squared by -2x is just x. Likewise, what's left when I divide -4x by -2x is +2. Okay, now my goal with this second group is to make it match what's left in the parentheses. And you'll see that the numbers are already correct, it's just the signs that are wrong. The negative should be positive. So what I'm going to take out is a -1. That way I'm dividing a negative by a negative, and I'm ending up with a positive. Negative divided by negative gives you a positive. From here, you can do outsides and insides. negative 2x minus 1, and x plus 2. And somewhere along the way, I accidentally dropped off my equals 0. So we're just going to re-add that back on. Okay. Now, to solve from this point, what you need to do is set both factors equal to 0. So I'm going to take this first factor, 0 equals negative 2x minus 1, and I'm going to take this factor and set it equal to 0. 0 equals x plus 2. Okay, then you just have to solve for x. So I'm going to ruin x's life, plus 1 plus 1. 1 equals negative 2x. Divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. And you get x equals negative 1/2. And x equals negative 2. Again, if this was too much for you, you can go back to this step, and instead of doing all this algebra, what you can do is graph negative 2x squared minus 5x minus 2, and you would get a graph that looks something like this. This right here would be negative 2, and this right here would be that answer, negative 1/2. So you can get around the algebra if you're not confident with that method. Okay, before we lock in our answer though, we need to double check that they are allowed to be our answers. And sure enough, we realize that negative 2 is not allowed to be our answer. So this is an extraneous solution, leaving you with just negative 1/2 as your true answer.